Hello, folks. It's Bradley J. and the Bradley J. Show. Today we are joined by Judith Kalaora, who's creator of something called History at Play, which these folks will tell you about, and Zoe Knight. And they join us to talk about their upcoming performance of Diana of Love, a story of Princess Diana. Hello, folks.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Bradley.
First, I guess, Judith, since you're the creator of, why don't you tell me about History at Play?
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on. It's been a while since I've seen you, so it's good to see you again. History at Play is an immersive living history performance troupe. We're an educational entertainment company. We utilize primary sources and reputable biographies to create immersive and interactive performance experiences where we chronicle the lives of influential and often forgotten figures.
So how do you mean immersive?
Our programs generally use the audience in some capacity, whether that is general audience work for school programs. We'll actually have student volunteers that will come on stage and participate in various ways. There's a lot of call and response. So, for example, the character or the historical figure might be going through a bit of an existential crisis, and they may call upon the audience to ask them for help. Now, we may know what actually happened, but of course, in present time, that figure doesn't know what's the right choice to make in their life.
That sounds fun. Zoe, tell me about this particular one, Diana of Love, in which you were involved.
So all of the songs that Judith is using for the show are actually songs that I had already written and recorded and released on my album with my band, Zoe Knight and Mythical Beasts. So Judith and I met at a party several years ago and became fast friends, and she knew she wanted to work with me. And I was very, very excited and honored when she said that she wanted to use my original music as the composition for this show. And I think certainly the message behind a great deal of my music is very much in alignment with what Princess Diana stood for, and what the kind of person that she was, just trying to spread goodness and joy and healing throughout the world. Those are pretty universal themes I think we can all use more of.
Zoe's music is incredibly important also because this program does feature a large amount of movement and interpretive movement and dance. A lot of people don't realize that Diana was an avid dancer. She had very formal ballet training. She actually trained weekly at the palace throughout her time as princess, 14 years as princess. And she also was someone who just loved to get out on a dance floor whenever she had an opportunity. We have multiple instances, including sort of that legendary photo with John Travolta. So it allows me to have this real rich musical enrichment to this program because we have a live performer or we have phenomenal music. And I wouldn't be able to do what I do bringing her work to life without that.
So the music is performed live?
Yes.
Yes.
That's an additional dynamic. So either of you can tell me why you chose Diana out of all the interesting historical figures that have portrayed. How do you choose Diana?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. And I know Zoe's got connections as well, as she mentioned, to Diana and her message. For me, Diana was always someone I admired her. I was sort of inspired and mesmerized. For example, I was a teenager when she was walking through minefields and Angola. I was much younger, but still remember when she was shaking the hands of AIDS patients without gloves in AIDS wards throughout England, as well as in New York City. And that was for me always so brave, so courageous in a time where there was so much stigma, specifically against folks with AIDS, right? We've seen it again repeating in recent years when there's an epidemic that we don't understand. We stigmatize people who have different opinions about that epidemic than we might have, and we just don't know enough about it to have any real 100% verified response. So she was one of those first people in the limelight that went out of her way to say, hey, we don't necessarily know for sure, but we do know that we can hug these people. We can shake their hands. We can be around them without fearing for our lives and the lives of our families. And I always felt that type of courage was something that I was mesmerized by.
Are there aspects of Diana's life that history really didn't focus on enough that you do focus on more?
Yeah, so her mental health challenges were predominant throughout her time as princess. She was not only severely bulimic, she had suicidal ideation, attempts at self harm multiple times. There's a pretty well known instance of her falling down the stairs at Sandringham, pardon me, at Balmoral in Scotland, which is of course the royal sort of favorite country estate. And I don't know so much if it was a purposeful attempt at suicide, but she was so horrendously depressed. One, because she probably had some sort of bipolar depression, but also later suffered from postpartum depression, that she tripped on the stairs and she didn't do anything to stop herself from tumbling down a few of these stairs. And I think that that speaks to so many of us who, especially during the past few years, have been in a state where, we really might not care what happens to us. And if something bad happened, we wouldn't necessarily be able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And I think that that aspect of mental health is one that's really crucial today as we, challenge ourselves and we meet the challenges of the day.
Zoe, do you have history in theater as well?
A bit. My history is mostly in music.
All right. Can you give me, let me back up a bit. When I talk to folks about upcoming performances, it's important to remember that you folks, in your mind, you know what it all looks like, but we don't out here. Is there a way you can give me a picture in my head of what your experience looks like, what the stage looks like, the setup, any more than you already have?
Sure. Well, the setup kind of depends on what the space is like and how big the stage is and where the stage is compared to the audience. We've done some performances of this where I was center stage in the back on top of the stage, and Judith would be in the front of the stage or on the floor in front of the stage. We've also done performances where I was playing a grand piano off to the side that's on the floor, and Judith is on the stage and on the floor, sort of in front of and next to the piano. So it's really just myself in either a grand piano or my keyboard, wherever we happen to be. And the piano is not, I'm not the focal point. Judith's performance and her set designs are absolutely the focal point, because most of the show doesn't have music. But the moments when I am playing, I am in a place where it's easy for me to be featured, usually kind of off to the side. But always where I can see Judith getting dressed behind.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Zoe's music is vital because it covers also some of our costume changes. So Diana has this incredibly vivacious wardrobe throughout her life, and that is featured heavily in this program. There's 8 costume changes in a one-person program is pretty intense, and so some of those wardrobe changes are super fast, and some of them are a little longer just based on the complexity of the outfit. And so Zoe's always got a really clear view of me in some state of undress, and I'm able to give her the thumbs up when I'm ready to proceed. But without that music cover, it's just it's just a bunch of empty space. So it's really, really important to keep the audience engaged.
Judith,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I would like to speak a little bit more as to how the music actually fits in with the show, because it really is truly integral. I mean, one of the things that makes it work so well when I perform with Judith live is that my songs are meant to be improvised over. And so it's not just, it's not verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. I don't write pop music. So my songs are meant to be as short or as long as they need to be. When I perform them with my band, there's no set arrangements. I just kind of call solos wherever we need them. So it's really easy for me to tailor them to however long it needs to be for whatever time Judith needs. But even beyond that, as Judith was talking about why she chose Princess Diana as a historical figure to focus on, and speaking to Diana's history as somebody who had really suffered a lot and had been through a tremendous amount of hardship in her life. And she chose to shine the light on those less fortunate and find things that were good to focus on. And for me, that's also that deeply resonates with me because myself as a survivor of all kinds of things, childhood abuse, violent domestic assault for many years, suicide attempts, rape, like lots and lots of things. For my own music, I also choose to focus on the good things while still acknowledging the hardships that we have been through, because we have to notice and acknowledge where we came from to honor where we're at really fully. And I think that because I really resonate with the backstory of Diana and how she got to be where she is and what she's choosing to focus on, that my music lends itself very, very well to the message that she is putting out there. In addition to just being, technically appropriate because of the way that I can stretch the songs out or condense them if they need to be for whatever amount of time there is. And I also am a dancer. I love to dance. So I write the music that I like to dance to. So it just sort of, it checked all these boxes that were necessary for the show. And it just all works together really, really nicely. And I'm quite pleased.
Would you characterize the music as sort of jazz-based that can be easily spoken over or ambient?
Much more complex than that. Can't put it under one category.
So to me, jazz implies not necessarily like a musical style so much as an approach to the music where you allow it to unfold the way that it wants to. And it can take whatever shape it needs to take depending on who and where it's being played. As opposed to pop and rock, which is music that, if you have a band that rehearses those songs, you play them the same way every single time, and you don't even have to look at each other to play the song correctly. It's note for note. But so in the sense that I approach it from the standpoint of I'm just allowing the song to be what it wants to be. I write a groove, and there are verses and choruses and things, but they're not always in the same order, and I might cut some things out, or it may have an extended improvisational section in it. So in that regard, yes, I would say that it's jazz, but in the regard, I don't feel that I perform it within the standards of the jazz paradigm. Necessarily not like you would think of like jazz standards or that sort of thing, but in the sense that I like to improvise the arrangements and a bit of the melody and add some solos in there. Yes.
All right.
Can I tell a little anecdote of how I met Zoe? So we were at a friend's birthday party, and I mean, everyone there were just phenomenal artists, and I was just so overwhelmed by the talent in that room. But then this girl comes and she sits down at the piano, and she just starts playing. And I love music. Music is my religion. When I go to see a show, I say I'm going out to worship. And when she started playing, it was like the whole room energetically started buzzing with this aura that was coming off of her. She's a band leader. And I think that's something that's really, really important, is she's not only writing the music, conceiving it, performing it, but she's also leading others in a way that very few people that I've seen leading a band lead them in such a capacity as Zoe does. And as much as I wish we could have the entire Mythical Beasts with us for the Diana of Love performance, having her creates that buzz and that aura. And my family and friends who've seen it just comment. I mean, she gets the first compliments whenever I talk to them after that Zoe is amazing. What a voice. She got a voice like an angel. And I'm like, I'm so happy to just kind of follow in her footsteps.
We're with Judith Kalaora, creator of History at Play, and Zoe Knight, who have put together a performance that's coming up called Diana of Love, it's a story of Princess Diana. Why is the LOVE capitalized?
It's interesting that I was trying to think of a name for this program, and I was looking through various books. There's this beautiful book about Diana. It's called The Portrait. It's huge. I have it in the other room, but it was part of the fundraiser for the Diana Project, the charity that was established after her death. And in that book, towards the end, there is a photo from the funeral of Princess Diana. And on the gates of, it could have been Buckingham, I'm not sure what the gates were leading into, but on the gates was a great big banner. And it said Diana of Love. And it said that in those caps. And just the way it looked, for whatever reason, the love in caps and the Diana with her first letter obviously capitalized, it just had such a profound visual contrast of Diana She was a normal person. Yes, she was nobility. People will often argue. I've had folks, naysayers, come up after programs, as Zoe will attest to, that have said, you only told Diana's sob story. You didn't talk about how Charles was hurt in this scenario. And I'm not one to say that Charles's experience is diminished by Diana's experience. Charles was pushed into a marriage that he had to commit to because of the rules and the structure of the firm, or the establishment, as Diana would call it, which is monarchy. He had to choose a noble. He had to choose a virgin, and Diana was really the last remaining candidate. But people forget she was 12 years younger than him. She was an ordinary person, raised as a noble, but also raised in a very natural, also difficult manner. Her parents were divorced when she was about 6. So she is just this normal girl with a normal name and no big caps and no big bolds. And then the love is just everything that she put into her work was so much filled with love and warmth that I felt the contrast of the caps to the non-capitalized was just something I enjoyed seeing. And that was what the banner said in the photo.
Do you find that post-COVID people are rushing to come out more than they might have been pre-COVID because they felt cooped and now they feel emancipated? Or not?
Zoe can also
COVID,
speak to this.
It was tough to drag people out. Now the restaurants are full. There are all kinds of gigs and venues opening up, MGM. What is your feeling on that? Zoe?
I think that the crowds have not bounced back. And this is why, sadly, we are seeing so many of the smaller music venues, especially, disappearing. Restaurants have kind of come back, but not even to the same degree. I know there are other restaurants that are small local chains, and they've ended up closing a couple of locations because there just is not the people to support them, or they've had to go entirely to takeout models. But as it pertains to music venues and entertainment in Boston, at least with my experience seeing live music in small clubs, there just is not the return to things. I mean, people don't want to go and stuff like sardines into a room that holds 65 people as much as they did before. I certainly don't. And so unfortunately, that means that we're losing some of the small venues. And I think it's really sad that the city of Boston is choosing to continue to open these massive places like the MGM Theater and Roadrunner and Big Night Live, but it's doing absolutely nothing to support the local artists who are actually here. They're just building all these tourist attractions, basically, so that they can bring in national touring acts.
Right.
But they're not creating any sort of space for the artists who are already existing here. And those spaces are just going away. Like the Middle East Complex in Central Square, that's been sold, and that's going to be done themselves. And it remains to be seen if the new property owners are actually going to maintain that clause in their agreement that they will continue to operate the nightclubs on the first floor and in the basement. But we'll see how that goes. But meanwhile, I know like Toad in Porter Square is unfortunately being sold as well. Christopher's, the adjacent restaurant, which is owned by the same people, is being sold. And it's expected. So Christopher's never reopened after the pandemic. Toad has just reopened, but they're at a fraction of the capacity that they were. So they used to offer live music 7 nights a week, and now they're doing 3 nights a week. And now they're closing because they just don't have the market for people coming out. It's the same thing at places like the Plow and Stars in Central Square. Wonderful venue, incredible bands that are playing there, but people are just not coming out. And it's always been like pulling teeth trying to get people to come out to a show. I think in Boston, people are less willing to do it. But what's really interesting is that it's been my experience. Every time I play outside of Boston, people come out.
Yeah.
In Boston, nobody wants to come out and see it. I don't know what it is.
It's a similar. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. Yeah. I mean, I always say, I know, I used to think, I know where the program has been marketed better. For example, we just had an event at the Big E on this past Thursday night. We did a performance in Storyton Village, which is on the site of the Big E, and it was very well attended. And I always say, well, I know when I'm out of Boston because we're the biggest thing in town, right? But when you go into Boston, as Zoe mentioned, they did pop up all these incredibly huge venues, like Big Night Live probably holds like 2,500 people. It's an insane venue. It's sort of reminiscent of the Avalon days back on Lansdowne Street. But like they're not, as you're mentioning, even small theaters. One of the reasons why History at Play survived is because our sort of basis of our programs is a lot of solo performances. So most of our programs are one woman or one man shows. That said, during the pandemic, we kept up a constant virtual performance feed because we could either perform in this studio, which is the History of Play studio, or our performers were in their own spaces, not, mingling bubbles, basically, and they were performing from their places. So it was a survival method that, I never knew going into it how fortunate we were to have this structure for how our programs were created. But definitely, as Zoe's mentioning, I'm really looking forward to see more people at the barn at Winthrop, at the Dean Winthrop House on Sunday, February 19th, because it is a free show. It is a performance that's, applicable for all ages, family friendly. There is some aspects of self-harm and bulimia discussed in it, but it's nothing that you wouldn't see on a regular TV show that your children could watch. And it's really accessible still. You can either, take the blue line to Beachmont and walk over. It's a little bit of a walk, but a beautiful one. Or you can just take the bus out there. So there's no reason to not be in there and showing your support and coming together as a community.
Yeah. Somebody tell me about the barn itself. What's it like? The barn at the Dean Winthrop House.
So I've performed at the barn twice before. I used to live in Revere, so they were sort of my next door neighbors, which was nice. And the Dean Winthrop House is an incredibly beautiful historic house dating back to the 17th century. And Winthrop was really one of the first political leaders of Boston, Governor Winthrop. And it was the dean was, I believe, one of his sons. Dean Winthrop's house it's still there. It's maintained by the Winthrop Improvement Historical Association. They also have folks that there's caretakers that live in the house as well. So there's constantly folks on site that make it feel not only really lived in, but also really super historic. And then the barn adjacent to the Dean Winthrop house is where programs take place. And they've got really beautiful setup in there. They've got a piano in there. It seats quite a large number of people comfortably. And it's just a really cool, unique space. And it's right there in the 34 Shirley Street. It's really easy to get to.
To give folks a little wider understanding of what History at Play is, can you talk about some of the past performances?
Yeah, of course. And this isn't the only performance Zoe's actually worked on. Zoe, do you want to talk about one of the other programs that you worked on with us?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. I think one of the most fun programs that I worked on with you was the Downton Abbey experience. We did a dinner theater show, a holiday show. At, I think it was a library in Connecticut, and that was just such fun. We had a very large cast. I think there were probably 8 to 10 people in the cast, and it was modeled after Downton Abbey, but we changed the name to be related to the room.
I think it was Hampton Abbey or something like that.
And it was just so much fun, and everybody. It had its own plot. It was almost like you would expect a murder mystery, but it wasn't a murder. It was it was just this love story, this beautiful unfolding of these two characters' journey together. And in the meantime, I'm playing all these Christmas carols.
and there were songs. We sing songs in that one as well. Yeah, and then there was the House of Hancock as well. So
the House of Hancock. Oh, I loved the House of Hancock. So even though I'm not so involved in theater, I love musical theater. I am such a ham for musical theater, and I'm kind of obsessed with Hamilton. I think it's absolutely a brilliant show in pretty much every single aspect. There's a reason why Lin-Manuel Miranda won the Pulitzer Prize for that show. It's absolutely brilliant. And I was just delighted when Judith let me know that she had written this show that was a satirical version of it, but based on John Hancock instead of Alexander Hamilton. And it was very, very funny. And we took a number of the songs from Hamilton and adapted them, shortened them, and changed the lyrics and adapted them to be relevant to John Hancock and his wife, rather than Alexander Hamilton. And it was such a joy to perform this. And again, a bit of a larger crew. I think we had 5 or 6.
We had 5, yeah. That one was 5, but multiple characters being played by, yeah. Yeah, so
Great.
both of those programs, and that was perfect description. Thank you, Zoe. Zoe's been a really integral part of many of our programs. House of Hancock, we retired after 2 years performing it. We got to do Patriots Day weekend at Lexington Historical Society 2 years in a row, so that was phenomenal. Had a really great time, but also recognize the fact that when you're doing a parody, you have to be careful of copyright aspects, and we wanted to ensure that there were no issues moving forward. So if we do revise that or revitalize it and give it a renaissance, we'll certainly be more careful about modifying the structure of the songs a bit more. But we had no issues during the run. It was just something that I knew as a playwright moving forward we needed to consider. But the other programs that we have in the repertoire are one-person shows. And so some of those programs, I think Bradley and I have spoken about Krista McAuliffe, who was, of course, the teacher on board the Challenger shuttle. She's from my hometown. She was actually born in Boston, but raised in Framingham, where I was raised. So that was a very important aspect of my career, and really leveraged history at play into a new realm of people identifying what we were doing and recognizing the work and its importance. The first person I ever portrayed is a woman named Deborah Sampson. She was the first woman to fight in the American military, but she was disguised as a man as she did so, and that was during the Revolutionary War. And she was honorably discharged by Henry Knox after about 18 months of active service as a Corporal Robert Shurtleff. And she's the official heroine of Massachusetts, which of course is where we live. So that's always been of vital importance in terms of recognizing that the first state in the nation to identify a person to be the official symbol of their state's heritage was Massachusetts, and they chose a woman. So that's always been really striking. Hedy Lamarr is another. Lucy Stone is a women's rights advocate and abolitionist from the 19th century. World War II, women of World War II, such as Spies and Wasps, which were women Air Force service pilots, and the list goes on and on. We have 13 that we are currently presenting in the repertoire.
So, folks, let me address you out there for a minute. If you're like me during this pandemic, when everybody had to stay in, you kind of get grooved in to staying in. And it's funny, it's tough to get bumped out of that groove and get back to your life and actually go out. And let me tell you, when you do go out, you'll say, oh, wow, I had forgotten this whole aspect of life and this whole aspect of living. I went out, I've been getting out more and more. I went out the other day to a David Bowie tribute band and a Beatles thing. And I'm getting in the habit of it again because I'm reminded how much fun it is. And if you haven't been out much, this event, Diana of Love, from these folks that are with me today, would be a perfect event to get out and bust out of your prison, if you would. So thank you both very much for being with me, and all the best. Once again, the next performance, the performance we're talking about is Sunday, Feb 19, 4 p.m., The Barn, Dean Winthrop House.
And make sure you get up and dance when Zoe's playing.
Dance, that's right.
Thank you
34
so much,
Shirley
Bradley.
Street in Winthrop. Anything you want to add that I didn't include?
Zoe, you go for it. Do you have anything?
No, just love one another. Go for it.
I will say, Zoe, please do follow Zoe's band, Zoe Knight and Mythical Beasts, and they have lots of shows. Some are family friendly, some are for adults. But if you can see her, she's around Massachusetts, lots of different venues, Maynard, Boston, Cambridge, all over the place, and it's always a night that you'll remember. She's wonderful.
Is there a work that we can search on Spotify or buy an album? Is there something recorded?
My album is called The Good. It is available on all streaming services. You can find me on Spotify. You can find me and my band on Instagram or Facebook at Mythical Beasts Band, or you can go to mythicalbeastsband.com, or Zoe Knight Music will route to Mythical Beast Band as well. I am working on some shows coming up. I was supposed to play at Boston Harbor Distillery in Dorchester this past Saturday, but sadly I got COVID and I had to cancel the show. But that hopefully will be rescheduled. I don't want to say a date because there's a date that we're working on that hopefully will be confirmed later today, but possibly March 11th will be the rescheduled date. I am working on another date at Sanctuary in Maynard, which is a beautiful, beautiful venue. And I do want to say that really all of my shows are family friendly. It's just the venues are 21 plus. But I don't write music that I wouldn't want my grandmothers to hear. So So you can be sure that everything is pretty, I don't believe I go beyond PG-13.
Yeah, her
And
lyrics are super beautiful.
All right. I guess that's it. So thank you very much. Oh, folks, if you happen to see this and you know somebody who might be interested, share it with them. And also, if you live in an area town, share it with your town Facebook group, because that'd be a big help. You could really make a difference doing that.
And you can
So
go to historyatplay.com is the website where you can see. You won't necessarily find a listing on the Winthrop Improvement Historical Association website because it's actually sponsored by the Winthrop Cultural Council. But just show up at Sunday at 4 p.m. and we'll be there. We guarantee you a great experience.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Bradley. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye, and we'll speak again soon, hopefully.
Great.